Welcome to Imprint, a podcast about creating a home and life you love. I'm Natalie Walton, an interior designer, stylist, and best-selling author focused on an holistic approach to homes. Each week, I'm sharing insights and interviews about the creative process to help you enhance both your interiors and well-being, as well as provide you with the tools and resources to make considered and sustainable choices with all that you create. Hello everyone, welcome to Imprint. Sometimes in life, I don't know if you've had this experience, but we're not sure of where all the threads in our life are going to come together and how it's all going to make sense in the end. And sometimes we can also worry, like, have I left this too late? Am I past the years where I can actually start to do something? Well, today's guest is a great example of how all the threads do actually make sense, and also it is never too late. So I am really excited to share with you today my guest, Caroline Moseley. We met in the Styling Masterclass, and I was instantly drawn to the beautiful interiors that she styled and how she captured those spaces with her interior photography. And more recently, she has joined my program Design and Grow. And so I have loved seeing her journey evolve as she is stepping into a new chapter in her life, bringing her love of interiors, teaching, and photography all together. So today she is going to be sharing with you how she styles and how she captures beautiful spaces in her home, and how you don't actually have to have like a perfect home to still be able to capture beautiful images. So this is going to be, quite practical and also inspiring in terms of it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, there is still room for you and there is still a golden opportunity for you to create the life that you really want. So please enjoy my conversation with Caroline Moseley. Hi, Caroline. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast and learn more about your journey, because I've loved watching your beautiful styling and photography evolve over the journey of knowing you. So as always, I like to start at the beginning and just to get a little bit more of an insight into you. And I think it's always interesting to learn about were you creative as a child and how you grew up and what type of home you grew in? So can you just share a little bit about those early formative years in terms of where you grew up and maybe what your home was like growing up?
Thanks, Natalie. So my family moved from England to Australia when I was 5, and we came from beautiful town Harrogate in Yorkshire and moved to the sandy suburbs of Perth at the time, and I think it was a bit of a shock to the system for my entire family. But we were really of that generation where I grew up in that generation where it was kind of go outside, play, entertain yourself. And so my friends and I, as I got a little older, would be, playing out in the local little bushland areas. And there was a lot of kind of entertaining yourself. And I think it really fostered a sense of creativity and resourcefulness that hopefully, I travel along has stayed with me as I've grown.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful way to grow up. I think to have that kind of freedom of just, following your whims and, all of those sort of things. And so tell me then, when you started to get a little bit older and start thinking about what you might do after school, what were you thinking then? You sounds like you were kind of creative as a child, and did you start to think, would you pursue that?
So I was a creative child, and I had, particularly my dad was very creative. He was he loved his camera. He always seemed to have his camera with him. That's my memory of those times. And we spent a lot of time on the beach as a family. He had an old Pentax camera, which was probably new for the time, an old film camera that he used to let me use. And so I was very creative as a child. And then came high school, but I was a very studious kid, and really applied myself. And what seemed to be the, I guess, part of the growing up in that era was that if you were studious and you could do those kind of more academic subjects, then you could. So I gave up art, stopped kind of creating in that way, and took up physics and chemistry and maths, sort of the harder maths subjects. English literature was my kind of one, I guess, slightly more creative area. I studied economics, which kind of looking back on it now doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But that was, it was kind of felt that you should do what you could just in case you needed it when you were older. So I had that side of me, that sort of that work. It wasn't a particularly happy time for me over those high school years, but I was at the same time, I was finding, I guess, creative ways of just sourcing really beautiful visual images. So I would be constantly, like rearranging my bedroom in my house. I'd be setting up little vignettes here and there without really knowing what I was doing. I was just, I think, probably trying to control my space a little bit, but also to try and bring some beauty. And I was very aware that I got a lot of joy out of that, and still do. And I was consuming a lot of those beautiful Merchant Ivory movies, and, I was a big sort of New Romantics fan. It was so in that era of a lot of beautiful visual imagery, and then contrasting that against studying physics and chemistry. Yeah, so it was an unusual time for me, and it has taken me a while to get back to something creative. Although I have, my work, my full-time work actually is, I consider, reasonably creative as a teacher.
Yeah, it's interesting you say about Merchant Ivory, because I distinctly remember watching those films as well and just falling in love with the aesthetic of them. And also when I was a bit younger than that as well, I was a diehard Anne of Green Gables fan. And I think because I partly loved the books, but also just loved, the aesthetics of that time. And yeah, I mean, I think that's the power of film as well, isn't it? That it can really transport you to another kind of place. And
yeah,
I love that. But it's interesting that you mention about going down that path of, physics and maths and doing things that you don't particularly enjoy. I mean, I remember for me, when I did well at school, and, and I think it was a time where if you did well, then you were, it was expected almost that like, well, you would make the most of your marks, or you would, pursue it. And I did economics of all things. And I quickly realized that wasn't for me. What about you? Did you go to further study after school, or what did that look like for you?
So I, to this day, don't really understand how I ended up in a science degree. I think it was this sense that you needed to have a profession, and that if if you could do the hard things, or, considered to be hard, then you should be doing them. So, and I didn't last long there at all. I finally, I think, woke up and realised that this was not for me, but still at that stage, I didn't really know what was for me. So much to my parents' consternation, I dropped out of uni. And while I was working out really what to do, my mum worked in a pre-primary classroom, and I just kind of went along to help and thought, well, this is kind of creative. I kind of enjoyed, no 2 days were the same, and I really liked being around the kids. So I kind of by default almost ended up in teachings in an early childhood degree. But fortunately for me, where that led to was that it gave me a real outlet for creating a beautiful space, because there was this classroom space that needed to be created to support the children's learning. And there's a very key principle in early childhood that the environment is the third teacher. So I could really work with the environment and it gave me that outlet of, I guess, arranging, styling, bringing beautiful visuals into a space that I think I had been looking for. So it's not just that's kept me in teaching all this time. It's certainly part of it, I think, but also, I love working with the kids, and schools are great communities, and I've really loved being part of a school community. So I'm still teaching, and alongside quite a few other things at the moment.
And so what brought you to the Styling Masterclass? Because that's when I first came across you and your beautiful work. So how did you come to be there?
Well, I was working with a camera. So my first camera that I owned myself was an Olympus camera, a very what you would consider now not a great camera at all, but for its time it seemed to be quite high tech. And we bought it. My husband and I, my two children, we went on a holiday to Italy, and we bought it as holiday snaps. But over on that Italian trip, I really fell in love with the architecture and just capturing the beautiful images. And I was just exposed to so much beauty there that it really I think it switched something on in me about capturing these beautiful scenes. And so when I got back, I set about teaching myself more about photography. I went and did a couple of classes, but mostly just through trial and error started to teach myself, bought an digital SLR, and taught myself things like Photoshop and Illustrator, and then started selling, alongside my teaching, started selling some artworks at the local upmarket, which is an art market 4 times a year here in Perth. And from there, I had my home, and I was constantly, I loved styling. I was consuming a lot of interiors books, interiors magazines. I really feel like I've got my 10,000 hours of consumption of those. And I wanted to, I was really getting stuck with trying to, I guess, market my artwork and capture it in a way that I wanted to capture it, the framed artwork, to promote it. And so that's how I ended up in the Styling Masterclass. A friend of mine had bought me for my birthday This Is Home. I don't think it had been out too long. And so that's how I came across you, Natalie. And so I ended up in the Styling Masterclass. And this all happened around the same time. So by then my kids had grown up. My 2 daughters had grown up. They'd left within 3 months of each other. They'd left home and gone to live in Melbourne. And it was such a shock, sort of a really difficult adjustment for me, going from that life that you have in your home when you've got young adults and their friends and all of that came with it. And then suddenly that was kind of not there anymore. And so it was a little bit of a grief period for me, and still kind of searching for that creative outlet. Came to the Styling Masterclass, and it was a bit of a lifesaver for me, to be honest, because I found like-minded creative people. I found a real outlet. I found that actually all this moving things around and this visual consumption that I'd been doing over the years had a purpose, and that it was styling, and that it was, it was something that actually was really highly valued by a lot of people. So I've dipped in and out of the Styling Masterclass, as you know, quite a few times, and really have loved being part of that creative community. It has really helped me kind of own that creative side of myself and really, really work through all of that, that disconnect between perhaps my earlier years and where I want to go now.
Yeah, and I've loved seeing your journey from, styling those beautiful prints through the Styling Masterclass, and then more recently, I mean, of course, every time you do assignments, and you are one of those amazing students that does take the program over and over again, because this is something that people can do because they get lifetime access. And I love seeing how you capture spaces. And I know more recently we've been talking, since you have joined my other program, Design and Grow, about sort of actually using combining this love of styling, this love of interiors, and your skill as a teacher to help other people. So can you just share, because I think this would be really valuable to people when it comes to capturing spaces, and like I said, you do this so beautifully. What are some of the tips that you would give to people? Say that they're just using an iPhone. What would you say, is good for people to know when they're just starting out to capture their spaces in a better way?
Mm. So I think when you're first starting out with it, anyone who's styled a space and they're not a photographer will know that it's really, really difficult to capture that essence of what you have done when you're translating that 3D space into 2D. Number one, I would say is to absolutely persevere with it. It can be frustrating, incredibly frustrating. The frustrations I have felt teaching myself these skills have just been enormous, but I've kind of pushed through. So I would absolutely say persistence is key. Also, top of the list, turn the lights off, open up the shutters or the blinds and let in the natural light. You absolutely can't beat that for casting those beautiful sort of the softer light and that contrasting shadow. It creates a real depth to the photos that you're not going to get with the lights on. The lights on is just generally awful. And most people don't have access to those sort of professional lights that a photographer would use. So absolutely capitalise on the window light, get to know your home. Where does the light come in? What time of day? And if you're using a phone for photography, clean the lens, make sure that's clean, keep it as stable as you can, get to know the settings, what the possibilities are and really play around with it. Get yourself a little tripod or a little iPhone stand and just play and explore, learn from the people who have kind of walked that path before you. And they would be my top tips for phone photography.
Yeah. And you actually mentioned before we started that you've actually put a guide together, which is really helpful for anyone who is thinking, I want to get better at taking photos of my interiors. It's called 6 Steps to Simplifying Interior Photography. So who is that for? And how will that be able to help them? We'll, of course, put a link in the show notes as well.
Right, thank you. So that's really for anybody who is interested in styling, or it's aimed at people who are perhaps considering getting into that area of styling as a business and who want to be able to capture their work, don't necessarily want to pay a photographer, and need to be able to create a lot of content to support their business. So they need to be able to take those photos themselves and to know all the workarounds and not the shortcuts, but the ways to get over those frustrations and those hurdles that you will come across when you are photographing your own work. So it's really aimed at people who are setting out perhaps in a small business capacity in styling, or maybe Airbnb hosts, people who need to capture a space in really beautiful images so that they can promote a business or market their business, and that can be part of their journey as a business owner. So that 6 steps to interior photography it's all about simplifying the process. It's all about, well, what can I do? I don't have the best equipment. What is it? What are these key things that I need to do to create beautiful images that will help me build a thriving business?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. I mean, images are just everything when it comes to working in, well, I was going to say the world of interiors, but any kind of visual medium, like if you've got any kind of creative business, you just have to have images that look professional, even if they're taken with an iPhone. And I mean, I take photos with my iPhone all the time. And I think to most people, they wouldn't necessarily know that it's taken with an iPhone when you do it, very intentionally. And like you say, using those, even just those few little tips you've already shared with us today, they are so valuable. And it's just so important. I see all the time when I'm speaking to, interior designers and stylists and people kind of wanting to get more work and get more clients. It's like it's so important to make sure that your Instagram is just at that next level and it just looks elevated, because you've got to create that belief in what you're able to create. So it's so important.
And there's even things once you've taken the photo, it's often editing is going to be the key to getting that really elevated shot. And when I first started, it was with photography, I felt really bad if I was editing my photos, but now I see it as another tool and another way to be creative. So and my photos, I think, have a bit of an editorial feel about them. So I often will crop really tight or crop out half of one of the objects in the image just to create that feeling of story and that feeling of, and a way to draw people into the image. So that's another tip, I think, for people, particularly who are just starting out. Play around with editing, explore. You can do so much already on your phone, but then there's other apps, obviously, that you can use. Lightroom Mobile's a great tool. So there's a lot you can do just with a phone. And then for people who are looking to go that next step further, then obviously I can give some guidance there as to, what to do, how to take that next step into, I guess, which cameras to select, etc., all of that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things that I was, very drawn to your photography with whenever you've submitted work through the Styling Masterclass, is that it does have that very editorial story-like feel to it. And I think that they are the types of spaces that really become quite captivating. It sort of draws the viewer into the space. And I think it's a really great technique. And I know that if people come and have a look at your guide and your work, they'll instantly recognize and see, what we're talking about. So definitely go and check that out and we'll put a link in the show notes, as I said. So you have been pivoting, as we mentioned, to doing more teaching in relation to this. And so I know you've got a course coming up. So who will that be for, and how will that help people?
So I've in a month or so, I'll be opening up a waitlist. Well, actually, the waitlist is just about to open up, but then I'll be running the course in a month or so for my Photo Fundamentals course. And that is for stylists, that's for designers, that's for anyone with an interest in interior photography, but especially for those people who have done the work, are learning the styling process, but then want to capture their images. We will be working through how to get over those frustrations and those challenges and the limits of, just working with the materials that you've got and working with the home that you've got. We don't always have, the biggest rooms or the best, I find it really difficult in my house to get back far enough. I've got an older house. It's beautiful in some ways, but frustrating in others. So, we'll talk through all those, how to get over those frustrations. We'll be talking about how to get yourself on the path from where you are currently in the area of composition, in the area of framing, in the area of your technical knowledge, how to get yourself where you are now to that next step. And we'll also take a bit of a look at editing. So anybody who has that, it's really for anyone with an interest in interior photography who wants to be able to capture what they're doing in their home or in their space, anyone who wants to build that into their business as a way and develop beautiful photographs for promoting their business.
What are some of the common mistakes, would you think, that people would make when it comes to taking photos? I mean, these might have been things that you've even done yourself, and now you recognize that was definitely like a part of my beginning journey. If there's some that come to mind?
I think that, as resistant as a lot of creative people are to plan things, I think you have to actually plan it out. You have to get your the materials and the whatever you need to do your styling. You have to have that kind of that vision of where you want to go with it. And I've certainly been, guilty of not planning. I still struggle with it because I just want to jump in and kind of play around and be creative with it. So what I try and do is I try and plan first of all, then set up my camera. When I initially started, I was taking so many photos with a view that, well, maybe if I take 100, then 2 will be great. So now I'm really much more deliberate in setting up my shot, and I give myself a good amount of time to really work through the process of what have I planned, but then I will allow myself some time to play with it and get creative. And look, more often than not, those end up being the better shots. So I think planning, really pushing yourself to plan and having a vision of what you want it to look like, but also understanding that, we have those visions that are a 10 out of 10, and, we have skills that are and equipment that's not always up there. I certainly, my equipment I could certainly be getting better equipment, but I've learned to get the best out of it, learned to troubleshoot. So I think planning is definitely something I see that is an area where people could kind of do a little bit more work on. I think cropping, absolutely. I can't I don't know why, but when I crop those photos, I think, getting in nice and close and filling the frame, I think that really makes a big difference. So often people are it's not a pulled back shot and it's not a close shot. It's kind of somewhere in between. And also, I think tethering is really, if you can tether either your camera or via Wi-Fi or via a tether cable, if you can do that and look at the photography as you're taking the photos, and then you can tweak the, move a vase 2 centimetres to the right or a picture 2 centimetres to the left, and you'll be amazed at the difference that makes in your photos. Even though it looks wonderful in the 3D space, you've really got to be mindful that you're translating 3D to 2D. So I think that's another key area as well for people to watch out for.
Yeah, and just in case anyone's not familiar with that term of tethering, it's where you have, traditionally it was a cable from the camera to, say, a laptop to be able to view the image on a larger screen. Because obviously when you're looking at the back of a camera, it's quite small all through the viewfinder. Although I'm one of those very strange people who actually really enjoys looking through the viewfinder. Whenever I work with photographers, they always say, I can show you on the screen, and I say, no, it's okay. I like to look because I like the fact that it's like you're looking through this dark hole, and I like the kind of the focus there. I don't know. There's something, I think, because that's how I learned, and I always had to do that. And most of my books, when we were traveling around the world with the photographer Chris Wands, and we didn't have time sometimes to tether. So it was like, okay, just look at the back of the viewfinder and, go. Yeah. So I kind of had to learn that way. But there is a lot of value. And like you say, planning and creating that vision is so important. Are there any other tips or advice that you think is, worthwhile sharing with people? I think your point about, really giving yourself some grace in terms of, not comparing yourself to a 10 on the spectrum, but like, how can I get to that next level rather than going from like, well, maybe my photos are a 3 out of 10 at the moment, but like, how can I get to a 5? And then when I'm at 5, how can I get to a 7 rather than kind of beating yourself up? Like, why aren't I at 10? So I think that's, important.
I think that's why it's really kind of, you need to be able to source people who can help you for a start, or find the information somewhere of how to get yourself to that next level. So it's knowing those steps in between. It's knowing, okay, so I know about composition. I know about rule of thirds. I know about leading lines. Where to next? How do I step up my framing? What is the next step for me? So it's getting that information from, knowledgeable people or people who've walked that same path. I think that would be certainly one of the tips that I would give. If you are looking at getting yourself, if you've been working on your phone but you really want to get a better camera, I would say get something that has got as many buttons on the outside as you can. You don't want to be having to go into the menu to change your camera settings. Look, and ideally where you want to end up is being able to shoot on manual. But I have to say my road to being able to shoot on manual has been years in the making. And fortunately, I think I can hopefully speed that process up for people by explaining what to do in perhaps a less technical way, because I haven't studied as a photographer. I've taught myself over a lot of years. So that would be absolutely. And also there's a lot of fairly good advice you can get from the camera stores if you're thinking of going for, say, a secondhand digital SLR. There's a lot of good information out there that can help you get from where you are to that next step, and then the next step, and then the next step. It's about small incremental growth and comparing yourself to your previous performances rather than, what you're looking at largely on social media. That can be really quite crushing at times when you're learning this new skill and you're really wanting it to promote your business. So it's really, you have that sense of urgency and you have that, well, I've got this, I've learnt these styling skills, or I'm working as a designer. How do I share that with people? So I think being kind to yourself, like you say, giving yourself a bit of grace, but also getting that knowledge, find yourself a community of like-minded people, just keep persisting, keep sticking at it, bring your creativity to it. And there's not one right way to do it, I think, is really an important message as well. There's so many ways to learn these skills. There's so many ways to be a photographer. For years, I have resisted the urge to call myself a photographer. And it's really, the more I practice this skill and learn this skill, then the more I realise, hey, there's so many ways to be and to create.
Yeah. And I think as well, there is, like you say, I mean, there's a lot of information out there, but then sometimes also that can be paralyzing, to sort of be exposed. And I mean, you can hop on YouTube and get a million tutorials, but I mean, I even did, I remember I did a course at the Australian Centre for Photography, and I was just overwhelmed by all the information and all the technical information. And sometimes to just have someone kind of alongside you and sort of saying, look, don't worry about that part now, get this bit right and focus on this. And, and like you say, it depends on where you are. Some people are good compositionally, and that's kind of me. I don't have any issue with composition. It's the technical thing. And I just get stuck on it and I get in my head about it. And you know what I mean? And so whereas someone else, they might be quite good at that, but they need help with the composition. So I guess having someone that can meet you where you're at is really great.
Yeah. And I've designed the Photo Fundamentals course to be able to break that up so that you can, the areas that you're strong in, you can take the next step, but also the areas where you've got a bit more growth that you need to do, you can still just take the next step. Most people's growth and development is not linear. So I really try and support people through that development in my online course.
Yeah. So I think there's some really great tips there in terms of, using natural light, really playing with the settings on your camera, making sure it's cleaned, which I mean, it sounds so basic and fundamental, but yet so often, sometimes they're not. And it's like people got thumbprints on the lens and all of those kind of things, getting your angles straight. I mean, and I love that tip as well and like what you do. I mean, we'll share sort of images of your work so people can kind of see this, but this idea of like shooting through a space to really get that sense of intimate, like a warm, inviting space. So it's sort of not too, it's just got more personality and more depth. And like you say, when you've got a small space that you're shooting, that can be a really great tip as well to kind of create that sense of depth as well for spaces. So many great tips. And I know that guide will have even more. So definitely, like I said, go check that out. So I always like to ask, I kind of call them the quick 10, but they're not always so quick, but we'll see how we go. But it's always interesting to get an insight into, different people and their perspective on this. So first of all, which 5 words best describe you?
Well, I would definitely describe myself as a continuous learner. I am constantly teaching myself the next skill along the list of skills, and I love being able to find out and learn, and I'm constantly on a path of learning getting new knowledge in loads of different areas. I would describe myself as creative and resourceful. I can be a little bit hyper-focused, which is great at times, and other times is quite detrimental. And I'm definitely a homebody. Love being at home.
Yeah. Well, as Caroline is speaking to me right now, she's got this beautiful light coming in through behind her and one of her beautiful prints on the wall. And so I can see, it's always, we've both got video on so we can see each other as we're talking to each other. I mean, obviously you can just hear us, but I always love having that little sneak peek into people's spaces just as I talk to them. So, which is lovely. So, okay, what's your proudest achievement? Oh, sorry, I jumped ahead one. What's the best lesson that you've learned so far, or one of them?
Oh, one of the best lessons that I think that your mindset is so important in obviously in developing a business, but also as a creative. But I think one of the best beliefs you can have in yourself is your ability to learn new things, your ability to, I don't know it now, but I can actually learn that, and to be okay with that. I think that's really something that I have learned along the way, that if you have that belief, self-belief that you can learn new skills, you're almost there.
Yeah, that's great. That's a really good one, because I think we can all sometimes feel a little bit stuck and, like, why aren't I making progress? Or, or we sort of tell ourselves stories that, we're not good at whatever it is. And like, money or tax or what, like, but we can learn anything from tax to photography. We can do it. What's been one of your proudest achievements?
So as as probably every mother will say, it's my children. So I have two daughters. They are adults now. They are wonderful, creative, kind human beings, which is, I think where we're all hoping our kids will get to, being just kind, functional humans. But yeah, very proud of the two of my girls. And in business, I'm really just proud of myself for sticking at it and for sourcing the information I needed and for finding a community of like-minded people and just kind of getting to this point where it's part of who I am, this creativity, and that I'm still teaching. I'm got my photography teaching on that I do when I on holidays and weekends and fitting it in, and I'm just really proud of myself actually for doing that.
Amazing. What's been one of your best decisions?
I think joining Design and Grow, which is a recent decision. I've been in Design and Grow for a few months, and it has really already helped me to kind of separate out a little bit the creative side and the business side. So obviously you've still got to bring a lot of creative problem solving to the business side, but it's really helping me be a lot more strategic in where I want to go and not just go around in this creative loop, which I think a lot of us do. So that has been a really, really positive decision recently.
That's so nice to hear. Who inspires you?
I'm surrounded by a lot of inspiring teachers. Anyone who teaches adults, or maybe teaches children, teaching is an act of service, and you give of yourself when you teach. You can't do it any other way. So I'm constantly inspired by people who teach others.
Yeah, we have some amazing teachers at our school, and I just in so much admiration for them. I mean, I get almost quite teary sometimes. I mean, I think I'm just getting more and more sentimental the older that I get. But when I go to, we have these kind of like class parent meetings, where we all meet as a group and the teachers share about the developmental stage for that particular age group. And I mean, it's so amazing. So yeah, I've got huge admiration for teachers as well. What are you passionate about?
I'm really passionate about creating a beautiful space. And making the most of the space that you have and using what you have. And then if you want to take that next step of documenting that, I'm really passionate about documenting my styling journey and my interior spaces. I'm really passionate about that. But I know there's a lot of other people who are the same, that joy that they get from absorbing those beautiful visual images. I'm really passionate about creating those and about sharing that and helping other people to build that in if that's something that they want to do.
And we will also share a link to your Instagram, because that's really beautiful. And you share lots of snippets around your home, and which, is beautiful. And you kind of share, tips and advice and other things. So we'll definitely share a link to that, because I think it really comes through, your love of interiors and your love of your home and making a home and making the most of what you've got as well, which, is something that, I've always been a firm believer in is, it doesn't matter what the size of your home or what your budget, we can all, make the most of what we've got with what's available to us. So I guess it's like you said earlier, being resourceful is like, foundational for you as well. So tell me, what dream do you still want to fulfill?
So I really do feel my photography journey started in Italy on this holiday with my family in 2007 and my clunky old Olympus camera. And I really am very keen to go back to Italy and just have the time to really explore and document what I see and just capture all of that beauty again. So that is a dream that will hopefully not be too far away.
Yeah, maybe you'll do a photography workshop there,
I would love to watch this space.
Yeah. I mean, well, maybe we'll end up doing a styling and photography workshop, because I know that we've got Aisling she's got a beautiful home in Italy. Yeah. So, who knows? Maybe
I feel like an Italian trip is coming up.
Watch this space, everyone. Because I'd love to go back too. What are you reading? What books are maybe either on your bedside table, on your coffee table? What are you reading at the moment?
So I'm really actually at the moment revisiting a lot of my interiors books. I've just over the years collected so many of them, and you flick through them and you read them in part, but I'm really going back and digging into what's been written by some really amazing people and looking at the beautiful images in these books with a photographer's eye rather than just with wow, I love these beautiful pictures kind of an eye, just to continue that journey of learning my craft. And so I think with, my full-time teaching and my online teaching, I think I'm kind of, sometimes it's just easier for me to dip in and out of books. But I do listen to a lot of audiobooks.
And what are some of the favorite books, interior books that you've got? Can you name one or two?
So many. Well, I love all of yours, obviously, Natalie. They're beautiful. I was just looking at the other night, getting back into the Kinfolk book. I've got so many. Athena Calderon. I'm sure that the people listening, we all have the same books, I'm sure. And look, you can see behind me, I've got, I've got so many. I've got Curate of Marianne Evenou. I'm never sure how to pronounce her French name. I've recently discovered her, and she's much more colourful in her design work than I am. However, I kind of stumbled across her because she's in these tiny little French apartments. She has those beautiful internal windows and creates little rooms with these internal windows. And I am a sucker for a window. So, that book, my daughter bought that for me. It's all in French. So I can't actually read that one, but I'm absorbing the pictures.
You'll have to give me the name, and we can put that in the show notes so people can go and check
absolutely.
It out.
Yeah.
And what are you listening to? Do you like to listen to podcasts, or you mentioned audiobooks? What sort of things do you like to listen to? So
I'm listening to at the moment, and I want everyone to go and actually listen to this because it's such a kind of just a reaffirming listen. It's called The Anthropocene Reviewed. And it's by John Green, who wrote The Fault in Our Stars. But it's kind of it's not a fiction book. It's his take on the current time we're living in, and he reviews all these random things he gives them 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5, but it's done so beautifully, and he weaves in just these real kind of heart-stopping, beautiful moments of his life, and he reads so beautifully, and he's really open about his own journey and his mental health journey. It's just beautiful. So that's something I'm re-listening to. I've already listened to it once, but numerous podcasts, business podcasts, creative podcasts, anything about innovation or design, I'm there.
And was the what was it called?
So it's called the Anthropocene. It's very hard to say.
Okay.
Which the Anthropocene Reviewed. But absolutely, if you're an audiobook person, listen to it because his voice is just so beautiful to listen to.
Okay. We'll put that in the show notes for everyone. So don't worry. We'll find it. We'll find it.
It's not design related or anything like that, but it's just, I've got so much out of it. I love it.
Yeah. No. Well, I mean, you've highly recommended it, so we all must listen. And finally, what piece of advice would you give to your younger self?
So I think I would tell my younger self that don't worry so much. You'll eventually find your way. You will eventually find your community of people, and all this this visual stuff that you're marinating in is one day going to be actually somewhere you can head for, a career, and that you don't have to just be one thing. And, I think younger me growing up in the 80s, I think couldn't have imagined, I guess, where we'd be now with our access to information. And so I would tell her that actually it's all going to be okay. She's going to be fine.
Yeah, that's a beautiful note to end on. I mean, I think it's so true, isn't it? That sometimes we don't know how all of those threads are going to come together. And yet look at you now, it all makes sense. This love of the home and love of teaching and love of photography, like it's all coming together in, a really aligned kind of way. And so I'm really excited for you, and definitely everyone should go and check out those resources, the free guide that you've got, and also go and, if you're curious to learn more, go and put your name down on the wait list. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you, sharing some tips as well with our listeners. So I think that's going to be really valuable as well.
Thanks, Natalie. It's been really lovely to chat.
Wonderful. Thanks. And like I said, we'll put everything in the show notes. So
Great.
You can all get it all there, all the links. Thanks. And we will be speaking again soon, maybe in Italy one day.
I hope so. Thanks, Natalie.
All of the links and info for this episode are at nataliewalton.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe so that you can get a direct download of the latest episode. And I really appreciate when you take a minute to rate and review, as well as share the love with someone you know who might benefit from this episode, or on social media. If you'd like to access a range of free resources, come visit my website, nataliewalton.com. Thank you to Jaeger Media for producing this podcast. And I would also like to acknowledge the people of the Bundjalung Nation where it was recorded, and pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I look forward to connecting again soon. I'm Natalie Walton, and you've been listening to Imprint.